This is a story of something that happened not that long ago. In a village surrounded by woods, there was a little girl as adorable as a flower. Her hair was as pitch dark as a moonless night sky, and her skin was porcelain white. Besides that perfect beauty of hers, she held many other treasures. For one, her smile. When she smiled, even the ineffable blacksmith couldn't help but smile back. For another, her singing voice. When she sang, not only the other villagers, but the wildlife in the woods began to sing along as well. She was living her cheerful life every day, receiving affection from her kind family and the lively villagers. It was on a warm, sun-blessed day. The little girl decided to go out into the woods with her friend in order to harvest some of the delicious nuts that were produced only when the leaves wore their autumn colors. Manipulated by the evil monster, the little girl rampaged around the village, destroying everything in sight. Toys, houses, and even things much more important than those. Her multiple legs wouldn't stop breaking things. The little girl was filled with a deep sadness. Though her figure had been completely transformed and her limbs were being controlled by the monster, her eyes, ears, and mind were the same. And then, before long, she started wishing for the end of her own life, unable to stand watching her precious things being destroyed. Yet, however strongly she longed for it, the monster wouldn't ever allow it. The reason was simple. The monster had been waiting hundreds of years for someone to manipulate. Just like any rain will eventually stop falling, those hell-like days of hers came to an end. It was a night with the most shining, golden yellow moon. Having heard a rumor about the monster, 2 knights arrived in the little girl's village. The tall one looked very tough. The younger, shorter one didn't seem as strong as the tall one. The taller knight spoke to the saddened villagers. "We too came from a far-off country to defeat the monster. We swear upon our honor that we shall strike it down and return the little girl to you." None of the villagers believed him. They merely assumed that there was no way for those knights to beat the monster, and they would just become the next victims. And so the little girl and the whole village were restored to peace. Although the village had been ruined terribly, none of the villagers ever blamed the little girl, because they all knew that she had simply been manipulated, and she was the one who'd lost the most. To celebrate the end of the tragedy, the villagers held a festival. Needless to say, they invited the little girl to join them. It was when she was surrounded by the din and bustle of the festival that she realized. She could sense the sweetness of the cakes on the table, but she could no longer find them tasty. She could sense the darkness spread in the woods, but she could no longer find it frightening. And she could no longer even feel pain or sadness about the fact that she couldn't feel those feelings. Maybe, after all of that destruction, even her mind had been destroyed. Or perhaps the monster had cursed her at the moment of its death. The reason couldn't be figured out. But all kinds of feelings within her had vanished. The little girl asked in a quivering voice, "Do you remember me?" He might be happy to see her doing well after he'd saved her. Or he might hate her because she never kept the promise at all. She didn't know the answer, but she couldn't resist asking the question. "I'm the girl you saved before. Thank you so much for everything you did for me," she went on, because she thought if she ever stopped talking, she would never be able to start again. "And I owe you an apology. I haven't been keeping the promise we made back then." Looking at her desperately talking, a confused frown formed on his face. And when he answered, it was something other than what she'd expected. "That young man is cursed." The reticent old man finally opened his mouth to speak. "What kind of curse is that?" He answered her with a hoarse voice. No one knows either what kind of curse it is, or how to break it. One thing's for certain, though. The curse will kill the boy in the near future. That answer of his brought her another question. How can you tell it's a curse when you don't know what curse it is? That's obvious. He carries a bag that he cannot ever let go of. However heavy it may be, even if it will one day crush him, he cannot let it go. What do you call that if not a curse? It doesn't matter what's inside the bag. It was too difficult for her to fully understand what the old man was saying. Still, she didn't think he was lying. Because if he was right about the curse, she now understood what made that night look sad all the time. She supposed that the loss of her feelings and her being here at that moment were all inevitable. And then, recalling the nights back died in the light of the sunset, she made up her mind. She would be the one to break his curse. Everything she had now was what he'd saved and given to her. She would simply return it to him. She made up her mind. Whatever it took, she would save him, even if that wasn't what he wished for, even if she had to sacrifice herself, even if she had to set the entire world against herself.